Thank you, friends, for joining me today for Breaking Open the Word. I'm Father Ron, and our gospel today is from Mark chapter 3. Standing outside, they sent word to Jesus and called him. A crowd seated around him told him, "Your mother and your brothers and your sisters are outside asking for you." But Jesus said to them in reply, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking around at those seated in the circle, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." That is our gospel today. And by the way, if you were listening for Concert Friday a couple days ago, in the background you might be hearing that concert again because the windows of the chapel are open. So that you got a double treat today. But folks, last week, Father Jason here on the God Minute gave a reflection that started with his experience as a kid growing up in a small town in Missouri, Perryville, it's called. And he said when people weren't sure who he was, they would ask him, "Who do you belong to?" Or in other words, asking who his parents are. Because like any small town, everybody knows everybody else. And once he told them, the response was always something like, "Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, of course." And with just that little bit of information, people knew who Jason was and could place him. And that's the question we're being asked in the gospel today. Who do you belong to? From where do you come? Who taught you and influences you? Who cares for and continues to worry about you? Jesus tells us in the gospel today, those who live their life doing God's will belong to Him. They are father and mother, sister and brother to Jesus. It's not blood that unites us as family to Jesus, but rather desire. A desire lived out in our choices and actions, in our commitments and sacrifices, in our gratitude and our willingness to serve. Jesus claims us as a family, as members of His family, when we do God's will. That's it. You want to belong to Jesus? Then do His Father's will. End of story. So it begs the question, of course, going back to Father Jason, who are you? Are you a brother or sister or mother or father to Jesus? Or maybe it's not so close. Second cousin, maybe? Or sometimes, as I think, reflecting on my own life, maybe like fifth cousin twice removed, In other words, friends, are you doing God's will? That's it. Are you truly serious about your commitment when you sign yourself with the cross? Does your life and your actions reflect the will of God? I'm just amazed at how simple the equation is. From Jesus Himself. Do the will of God in your life, and you will be embraced like family by Jesus and His mother and the company of saints. Don't do God's will, and you leave that family. And let me tell you, I, for one, want to be considered the brother of Jesus and not a distant relative thrice removed, right? And my guess is just the fact that you're listening to this reflection now, I'm guessing you're probably the same. So, do God's will. And like Jesus, I'm not talking about an esoteric or philosophical approach to the will of God in one's life. I mean, don't ask questions like, how do I discern the will of God in my life? Or what are the signs to recognize in knowing God's will for me in my life? I don't think that's what Jesus is talking about here. What is God's will for your life? There's no magic formula to figure out or truth to unhide, because God Himself told us what He wants. It's clear, it's simple, and it's direct. And the best part? You already know it. So here's one, in fact, the will of God. Here's the first one. Keep the Lord's day holy. Right? God told us His desire, His will for us to make one day of the week special and blessed, turned to Him. So are you? We've always associated going to Mass on Sunday as checking that box. And sure, that's one way, to make an hour of His day holy. Well, maybe holy. But how about the other 23? Or maybe you don't even go to Mass because, well, for whatever reason. All right. But then what else do you do in place of it? How do you lift up and elevate and make special or holy that one day of your week? Or here's another will that God has told us He wants us to follow. Honor your father and your mother. That's also the will of God for our lives. And they must teach that because 99% of all the kids' confession that I have are sins against that. I've disobeyed my mom and dad. And I'm not feeding my dog like I'm supposed to. Who knew God willed that one? But maybe, like me, your mother and father have passed away. But it still leaves the question, how do you honor them, even as they have left this world? Right? I mean, how do you continue to remember and celebrate the gift and treasure they were in your life, and continue to be present in and through you and those you love? A special dinner on their birthdays or anniversaries, maybe? A visit to their resting place with fresh flowers to continue our gratitude and remembrance? I don't know. We have a whole day here in the U.S., other countries do too, of remembrance and honor, what we call Memorial Day. We just passed it. Every year, we celebrate it for our armed forces and their sacrifice. It's a federal holiday for those we have or maybe have not even known. So if they get a whole federal holiday, how about our mothers and fathers who have also given up so much and sacrificed on our behalf, on yours? And before you scream in exhaustion or switch me off, I promise I'm not going through all 10. But my point, friends, is that perhaps today we might revisit the will of God for our lives. The foundation, the elements upon which our lives as His brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers, is woven. So How about this? Choose one, and let this week before you find creative ways to incorporate it more profoundly in your life. And if you're struggling to remember them, as I confess I did, I listed all 10 of God's will in the notes for today's prayer. So look at them over. Let it reflect upon your spirit. Today's gospel is what you call, I think, a back to the basics gospel. A way to not only change your spiritual life and elevate it, but in the process will move you from the bottom of that family tree up to the top where you belong. So I'll end as I began with the words of Father Jason. Who do you belong to? And may God's blessing be with you this day, friends, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Thanks for joining me. Have a beautiful one on this, the Lord's Day, and we'll see you tomorrow.